Hello, witches. Grab your goat, grab your knife, because it is time for the Witches Movie Coven. Indeed, get something to drink, sit back, relax, and be prepared to laugh, to cry, to possibly get hexed. Less of that tonight without though. Um, I'm glad you came. I am Patti Negri. I am one of your hosts. You might know me from Ghost Adventures, from the Witching Hour, from events all across the world, me and my goat. No, I never bring my goat. Everybody else brings their goat. I leave my goat home because I'm a bad mother. Happy Mother's Day, and that's well, happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. I'm going to stop rambling now. I'm going to move this on to one of my co-hosts, Richard-Lael.
I am Richard-Lael. Richard-Lael is one name, not two. If I were just Richard, I would be a... I am known as the gentleman psychic. I'm a psychic and a medium. I used to be a psychic and a small, but I gained some weight. Unlike other psychics here in New Orleans, who are all doom and gloom or love and light, I am a happy medium. With that, you have maybe seen me on Ghost Adventures. You have definitely seen me on Witches Movie Coven. Sometimes you see me on Scared and Alone. Sometimes you find me at University of Magicus. I am so easy to find.
Thank you very much. And he is. Let's go down to the lovely Jason.
I'm Jason Mankey, the Llewellyn author. My book, High Priest Raymond Buckland, the Father of American Witchcraft, officially drops tomorrow, which is why I made everybody watch this terrible movie tonight.
Okay, thank you. Heather.
Hi, I am Heather Greene. I'm the author of Lights, Camera, Witchcraft, and I forgot to grab it. Here it is again. Here it is. This is my beat up copy, as you can see, with all its notes. It is the critical history of witches in American film and television. And I am also an editor at Llewellyn Worldwide, and I work with wonderful authors like Jason and Patti and our guest tonight, which I won't surprise anybody, but Dorn, all wonderful authors. And I also am a journalist, and I cover all things occult. You can find me on social media here, and who knows, all kinds of pagan events happening around when I can.
Thank you very much. And you'll see Courtney is not here, but we have a beautiful, beautiful guest today, as was almost introduced by Heather, Thorn Mooney. Welcome, Thorn. Thanks for coming in.
Hi, Patti. Thanks so much for having me. Nice to see you again.
You too.
Can you tell us about yourself, Thorn? Come on.
I sure can. Hello. My latest book is an academically informed survey of contemporary witchcraft as a collective movement. It's called Witches Among Us. And I've got a couple of other books for practitioners. But aside from being a witch priestess and coven leader, I'm also an academic. I'm working on a PhD in religious studies, and I specialize in all kinds of things. So hello.
Welcome. We are thrilled to have you. We wish well to Courtney wherever she is. This week's movie is a slightly different movie, and I know I've talked to a few people. You had trouble finding it. We might have given you two different names. And what is the name? What help?
Yes.
So the problem is that when this movie was released on VHS tape in 1989, it was called a Witchcraft Yesterday and Today, and then it was re-released on DVD, where it was called Witchcraft Rebirth of the Old Religion. So the name got dumber and dumber as it came out in the second time. That's why it's hard to find. That's why there's kind of two different names for this movie.
Okay, thank you. Well, that is our movie tonight. And hopefully those of you were able to found it, and were able to watch it. But just in case you didn't, Richard-Lael, do you have an unbiased synopsis of this lovely film?
And how? So, a fern tries to escape for an hour. The fern wiggles for an hour. The real story is, on Midsummer and Halloween, reincarnated witches from Salem rise to not summon the devil because they don't believe in the devil, because that's Christian, and they're not Christians. And then they get naked and there's lots of boobs and butts. Lots and
Boobs
lots
and
and lots of
butts.
boobs and butts.
Boobs and butts.
But there's no
Boobs and butts.
sacrifice, because that's not what they do, because there is harm to none. And it is not Courtney Buckley, but Raymond Buckland. Just so you know, just so you're clear, that is what it is. This is 1989. And he says a bunch of words, mostly about witches. And he is between, there's another one. And then they do more naked dancing, and then they do some grapevines, and then they do some raising of the sword and some salting of the salting of the table and the pouring of the wine and the horny god, horned god, and there's another fern, and then he says, "So mote it be," and that's sort of the end of the film.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Richard-Lael. Now, we're all very clear on that. As always, you just get us from beginning to end. But just in case, there might be a couple things that Heather may pull out for us, because she is Heather Greene. Do you have 5 things we should know about this film, Heather?
Yeah, I have some things. I'm going to add a little bit. I'm sure that Jason, having written the book about him, can probably detail more. But I'm going to try to introduce a few extra ideas for you guys to talk about. But I do have to say, Richard-Lael, that was probably my absolute favorite synopsis you've ever done. I think the ferns, they did it. That was over the top and perfect. So it was Raymond Buckland between the two ferns. I think that would be the next movie we need to make. I love it. So what are the first 5 things we need to know about it? First, some basic information, context, and then Buckland in the movies, and some notes about the production, and then what happened to it. But number 5 has already been taken by Jason, so I may just skip it. So basically,
What did I take? What did I take?
No, it's all good. You wrote the book, Jason. It's gonna happen. It's all good. So basic stuff. So this film was made in 1989. It was directed by DeTracy Regula, who actually worked in the industry. Produced by Llewellyn. It cost today, with inflation. Thank you for having the numbers in there, Jason, in your book. $18,000, which is absolutely nothing. Okay, this was low budget as you can get. Carl Wishecki, who was head and owner of Llewellyn up until very recently, was very interested in He was corresponded with Raymond, but very interested in very innovative, liked ideas, loved film. In fact, I'm working with. I've been working on trying to discover a film that he was in, a narrative film that he was in the 70s about witchcraft. It was a narrative film, but he was very interested in filmmaking. He was very interested in the pagan community. So, of course, it would not be surprising that he would jump on an idea to work with Raymond on this project. He had already done another project with Scott Cunningham, who you will also know wrote a number of books that are landmarks for this community. And that one was on herbal magic earlier in the decade, but he then did this one. It's not surprising that Carl would do this. And of course, video was extremely popular at the time, and it was a new medium, a new way that we could actually make movies more easily, cheaper, for better or worse. Prior to this, you had to have film. So this was a new medium that was creeping into the 70s, into the 80s, and eventually it would be overtaken by the internet. And now we have YouTube and TikTok. So this was the first beginnings of that. And it's not surprising that Carl would want to produce this under the Llewellyn banner. Of course, that's how this kind of played out. So you have them do it. They did it in a few days, and you have this wonderful example of documentary filmmaking. But you know what? The other thing you need to know is context. This was made in the center of the Satanic Panic. Hollywood had already picked up on it. The media had already picked up on it. By 1989 and 1990, it was full blown all over the place. Now, the Satanic Panic I've talked about really begins, they pinpointed in the early 80s, but it grew slowly on the ground. And a lot of people, a lot of Wiccans, a lot of witches, a lot of occult practitioners were feeling it before Hollywood, before the media had picked up on it. They were being oppressed, they were being marked. And because of that, a lot of those folks, those witches and those Wiccans who had been practicing since the 60s and 70s were starting to emerge out of their broom closets. They were coming out of the stage, I like to call it the Aries and Taurus stage, where they were sort of out of the emergence stage of the community and now saying, here's our voice. They get to that Gemini stage. That's how I kind of look at it. And they get to the point where they're saying, no, we're not devil worshipers. We're not part of the Satanic Panic. We're not doing stuff to children. And so you see a lot of this happening. There were a number of appearances. Buckland himself, Cunningham, appeared on television. You also had other documentaries. One of them, the most common one people cite, is The Occult Experience from 1985 that has a number of practitioners in it. So you have this emergence, this public emergence of these figures. And a lot of these are people you know. And the reason you know them is because they were emerging at this time to speak out against the Satanic Panic, if for no other reason. So this fits into that era. So number 3 is Buckland in the movie. So Buckland, I just have to say, this has nothing to do with this particular movie, but it shows Buckland's interest in movies and this kind of media. Is he is actually marked as the first person who is cited and noted as being an advisor to a narrative film. Now, he probably was not the first one. I would wager to guess he was not. Paul Huston was in the industry prior to him, and his book was used throughout the 70s. And I would say Anton LaVey was probably there before as well. But they were never noted. They were never cited as being advisors. Buckland is the first. The movie is Necromancy. We did this before. You've all watched that wonderful 1970s film. It had Orson Welles in it. You guys remember it? That one was Buckland did advise it. He did try to be in part of films. He actually wanted to do Macbeth. They turned him down, but he was there and his work was there. So Hollywood knew his work was there, but he does have the award. There it is. He does have the award or the notoriety of being the first occultist that we know to have advised a film, a narrative film. So number 4, I'm going to talk about the production. Now we can, I'll get to commentary on the production later, but just in the interest of facts and is that just like every production, things go wrong. Lots and lots of things go wrong. And Jason does a nice job of laying out some of the fun stuff in his book, the things that go wrong. And one of the more tragic things that went wrong is Buckland actually wound up with a really bad back problem. And when I say really bad, apparently he had discs that were slipped or that it was that bad. And if you had problems with your spine, you know how bad I'm talking about. So one of the reasons most likely that Buckland doesn't move throughout the entire film is that they propped him up into the chair and said, don't move, just talk, because he couldn't. Jason, you're going to say something?
So I interviewed the director of the film and I asked her about that and she doesn't remember it. It was just planned that he would sit there and not move.
So, and you know what, that goes with the commentary, that he wanted to be sort of like that Vincent Price, Orson Welles figure,
Yes.
just sitting there. So yeah, so they might have planned it, but he also had the back problem. So who knows what the lore is, but he did have he was
Yes.
apparently in severe pain at the time.
He had to guard the fern. That was
He
the most important.
the fern that was moving throughout the whole thing. So there's a lot of commentary where I have lots to say about the movie as far as its production value, but I think it's notable to say he did have a back problem, but he kept going. There were a lot of other issues. as there are in every film. The people walked in on them when they were filming, when they shouldn't have been there. Lots of stuff. But it is also good to know that most of the people in this film production crew, as well as the people in it, were all witches and Wiccans, with the exception of a few, which is nice. Rare in terms of narrative films, not rare in terms of, films like this. And other ones like this. And as Jason said earlier, what became of this movie? Llewellyn re-released it on DVD in 2005. Why? Probably because it is essentially a relic, a piece of Wiccan and witchcraft history. It is no more than that, to be honest. But to have it accessible to people in a museum capacity, to have it be in the museum in Ohio, to have it accessible, to see a piece of witchcraft history, to see a piece of the building of this culture, of this community, and that's where it sits. So the release of it fits into that. It's now in DVD and it's now in YouTube. So that is the origin and where it is. And the Buckland Museum in Ohio is where you can find a lot of this stuff, if you're curious, as well as a lot of these other pieces. Buckland has a YouTube channel. You can go on there and see a lot of these other that's a DVD. If anyone doesn't know what a DVD is, that is a DVD right there. And there's some people out there that might not know what a DVD is.
For sure.
Yeah. So you can go to the Buckley Museum on YouTube and see some of this stuff as well, because they post a lot of these interviews and old stuff there. And you can see Buckland and Cunningham and Selena Fox and all kinds of stuff from this era. So there you go.
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you. All right. So, Jason, you just did the book. You are here. Do you want to start this out, or do you want to?
Well,
His favorite film ever.
It is my favorite film ever. It is the documentary to end all documentaries. I think Heather really does a nice job there, especially at the end, of summarizing kind of what makes this film worth watching, is that it is a time capsule to a particular era. And yes, a lot of the information in it we now know is very, very wrong. And the production values are very, very low. As Heather said, though, they were working with almost no money. That it looks as good as it does is amazing to me, since they had about 45 cents to make this movie. But it's a part of our history, and I sometimes think that we don't do a very good job of preserving and talking about our history, except for maybe 5 or 6 books. So I think going back and watching this, you can kind of dip into what people thought witchcraft should look like in 1989.
Thank you.
I have lots of other thoughts too as we'll go along.
Okay.
But those are my nice opening thoughts.
Yeah, lovely. I mean, I was here in 89. I was practicing witch in 89. It feels older than that. I don't know. I even like hairstyles. I mean, I get the robes, I get all that, but I kept thinking he's fine. He's in his library, but I don't know. And I just kept thinking I was watching something that looks like it was made much sooner as that. I don't remember that hair and in 1989 and any of them, the men, the women.
I mean, it was San Diego. So like in LA, you were probably a little bit more hip, but in lower California, in Southern California, different story. They were behind the times, Patti. It's just you living in LA. Okay,
I guess the boys, the girls, all of it. So that's just the first comment I wanted to make, because I was just like, is this old footage? I couldn't figure out. I like the dancing. We could always talk about the dancing. It feels late 70s. Yeah, Tabitha, that's what I was getting. It feels very late 70s. And I'm thinking maybe they didn't have money to tape some new ritual work or something.
Everybody's mom had that hair. I was a child in 1989.
Really?
Everybody's mom had that hair. And their dads.
Okay. I guess my little part of Los Angeles was different. but I love
And
it.
those mustaches.
And the
the
mustaches.
mustaches.
And the mustaches, yeah.
Mm-mm-mm.
And my issue again, my biggest issue was I think the lack of passion in everything. You know, the ritual work, show your sword, do your great rite, do all. I was like, are these actors who don't know what they're doing? But not, you're saying they were real Wiccans and stuff. That would have been.
They weren't actors. I mean, they were just people in the local community who signed up to do this. Interestingly, Llewellyn had to approve everyone that was in the movie because they wanted them to look a certain way. They wanted to make sure that the people were pretty. Also, Llewellyn mandated that there be nudity in the movie. That was one of the things that they had to do to get the movie made because, you know, boobs and butts sell VHS tapes, apparently.
We love boobs and butts. Lovely
We
boobs.
do.
We had lots of boobs and butts, and we always rate that high. But I wanted to feel the passion in ritual and calling corner in the circles. So that and the hair. Oh, the way he pronounced. I don't. How did he?
Athame.
He said Athame. He said Athame,
Athame.
which is actually the correct way to pronounce it because that's how they pronounced it in England.
In
So
England,
that's how Gerald Gardner and Doreen Valiente would have said it. That's how he learned it when he was initiated by Monique Wilson in 1963. But most of us don't say that now. We say Athame or Athame, right? Depending on where you live. But yeah, the Athame is actually how they would have said it in 1952.
Really? Okay, so now we're going to have to start using our Athames.
No, just continue not to say that because it sounds terrible.
Athame.
I also wrote a book all about Athame, so like I'm also an expert on that. So just, you know, run with me. I can talk to you about Buckland and Athames.
Okay.
You know,
Go.
Yeah.
Richard-Lael.
Well, you know, it was really an important film. I will say that it was really important, and it inspired an entire generation. A lot of people didn't know this, but Ricky Martin actually is a witch. You wouldn't know it, but he is. Ricky Martin's a witch. Apparently, he's a Puerto Rican.
Oh. And I don't have
Where are
any
the ferns,
sunglasses.
Richard-Lael?
Yeah, it was a little bit like listening to someone read the encyclopedia. But I will say that it was fascinating to watch from 1989, and it did make me want to read Jason Mankey's book. So I wanted alternative media to understand a little bit more about Raymond Buckland.
Yeah, it does make you want to read your book. So that's good. That's why we did this. So we all
Thank you.
Jason.
Checks in the mail. Checks are in the mail.
Thorn.
Hello. I want to echo what Jason said about how I think that it's really easy, especially for people who are new to practice, who've started practicing in the last decade, how important context is, right? It's very easy to look at this and be like, he's only talking about Wiccans, or we don't even believe that, right? But you have to consider when this film came out, who's involved. And I think that we actually don't know our history very well. I see that in everything that we kind of say collectively on YouTube, the books that come out every year. I think that we have assumed that we have moved past our history, so now we don't spend time with it. And this is one of the ways that you spend time with it, is by consuming bad media, right? And considering its context.
Thank you. It did remind me, I mean, except for, again, the lack of passion, which I don't care. It reminded me of the simplicity of when I first started. I was in a very Wiccan group of Long Beach Women's Spirit back in the 80s, and that just simplicity that I've long lost. I've long lost.
One of the other things too, when we talk about this movie feeling older than it actually is in certain places, for his entire life, Ray was really locked in to a couple of beliefs, and he would repeat them over and over, even though they began to fall out of popularity in the greater witchcraft community. He was always very much witchcraft is a religion, period. I'm going to say witchcraft is a religion. It's very important to me that witchcraft is a religion. Witchcraft can't just be a practice, it has to be a religion. And he used Wicca and witchcraft interchangeably all of the time. The second is that witches don't believe in Satan and they don't believe in the devil. That was something he would say over and over. It was probably a very good idea to say during the Satanic Panic, but I know Thorne and I and Richard-Lael all disagree, I'm sure, on that idea that witches don't believe in Satan or the devil, or that he has no place in this. Of course, if that's what your thing is, that's what your thing is. And it's certainly a part of the Horn God mythos. And then the other part that he was really big on was that witchcraft was this ancient religion, that it dated back 25,000 years. And I remember the first time I watched this on VHS, I just started laughing when I heard his history, because it's basically Margaret Murray. Margaret Murray is very influential. In 1921, she writes this book called The Witch Cult in Western Europe, where she argues that witchcraft is a religion that existed side by side with Christianity until the persecutions, the witch trials. And there's some truth to that, but not really very much truth to that at all. And he would repeat those things over and over and over, even up until he died. And so everything that he did, he prefaces all of his witch talks with those three ideas. And that's basically the first 30 minutes of this film, is him saying that over and over and over. And as Thorne and I were texting today, talking about how often Christians can have sex.
I mean, I love the idea that witchcraft had to become a religion. Well, it had to enter the public eye so that people could have heteronormative sex very politely.
Mm-hmm.
Thank goodness.
I mean, you could only do it like what, 30 days a year, maybe 4 days a year or something, according to Ray's long spiel about it. You know,
and
it's
the
like
people rebelled.
Yeah, this is about witchcraft. Get to the witchcraft. Stop going on and on about this other crap. And I think that's probably the biggest problem with this movie. It's just Ray talking at you for 30 minutes.
Isn't it interesting, though, that he tells us that Margaret Murray has been debunked, and then he spews Margaret Murray?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was very interesting.
Right. Well, and again, kind of echoing what I was saying earlier about history, we, right, and I know folks who are on TikTok and Instagram and other platforms know this, we dunk on Margaret Murray all the time while simultaneously spewing Margaret Murray. And we don't even know it because nobody has read Margaret Murray.
I can't blame them, though, for that. It's hard to read Margaret Murray. Certainly
well,
not
then
an
you
enjoyable...
don't get to dunk on her.
True. I've read Margaret Murray. I can dunk on her all I want, but most people haven't. Yeah.
So I want to talk about the production values, since that is, you know, I've watched a lot as a historian. I've watched a lot of that's fantastic. And I'm just going to let those pictures go by because they're so great. But I watch a lot of bad movies. In order to know what good movies are, you have to know what bad movies are. And I don't have a problem. And I think, no, I didn't say that yet. I have not said that yet. I did mind this movie. I minded this movie for a lot of reasons. I mean, outside of, yes, context, you have to know what he's talking about. Get past the wrong histories and all that stuff. And then the section on the way he describes witchcraft is like every book that was created at that time. The Llewellyn books were teaching that. And so contextually, you need to look at that from that perspective as far as what he's teaching, exactly what has been said already. I wished it was someone had done some cutting. Someone had done some worked on the editing of this to make it not be a 1 hour of Raymond sitting in a chair talking at me, because it was the longest hour of my life. I love Raymond's work. I honor the history. This is definitely worthwhile historically for us to see this. But I wish that they had. Now I know that they didn't have a lot of money to be able to cut B-roll, to have pieces, to be able to cut in, but you can splice even with what they had to create not so much drama. You don't want to create drama of narrative film. You don't want to create the craft. Although this is the interesting part, is that this is totally film nerdy, but the way we consume media changes by our age. So if you're used to watching films from a certain decade or even a certain culture, you're used to that. So it's difficult to watch other things. So people today, younger people who are used to consuming not narrative, but documentary films the way they're done today, in our current culture and our internet culture, will have even more trouble with this movie. And that's the problem I have. I wish even then it is slow. Even for that period of time, it was slow. And I just wish somebody had used an editing machine and spliced some things in. It was done in 89 and 90. That was not difficult to do. They didn't have to use film splicers. They didn't have to have cutting room floors. They were still working in video. I was editing at this time. I was working in a production company. And in fact, I made a 10-minute Wiccan documentary myself exactly at this time, which cannot be shown because the people in it are not out of the closet. But besides that,
you can't tease us like that.
I can show it
Come on,
privately.
Heather.
I cannot show it publicly. But I just wish there was some cutting. I wish there, even with a low budget, they could have added in pieces to break up Raymond's spiel. Wrong, right, historic, whatever. They could have just done it so it was a little bit more engaging, so it didn't feel like I was sitting there for 3 hours. And that is what I wished. I love the fern. I love the haunted fern. That was fantastic. I loved his Mr. Rogers attire.
And that was the thing about Mr. Rogers. I was about to say that myself, is that the only thing that would have made it better with his Mr. Rogers attire is if he would have come in and like put on the sweater, the cardigan, put on his trainers and said, "Hello, won't you be my Wiccan neighbor? I like witches. We're all a little witchy." Like, that would have been great. "Won't you be my witch?" I love it.
I read enough books in the editing where when it got to the production, when he started to talk about witchcraft, I have been working for the last 4 or 5 days or last couple weeks on some beginning Wiccan witchcraft books. And so when I got to this, I'm like, oh my goodness, now I'm seeing one of the books I'm working on here. He's talking about this stuff. It's like, it's stuff that I've seen 100 times. I can hear what he's saying. I can see what he's saying. It's very much in line with the teachings of that time. And, and it may not appeal to people today. He's, like Jason said, his stuff has gone out of favor, but it is important. And I just wish the film, not the quality, but I wish the production value, I wish the editing had been done so it's a little bit more engaging, so it's a little bit easier to swallow. And they could have done it, but they didn't. And that's the most unfortunate part for me about this. I was talking to Raymond as it went, and I'm like, what are you talking about? But I do want to say, honoring Raymond, this is not my first, this is the book, and this is not my very first Raymond Buckland book. This was given to me when I started at Llewellyn because I lost my first one that I got back at the time when this movie was made, and I had writings in it. Oh my goodness, what has happened? We have a thumper with us.
We do.
Thumper, yay! That is
getting told. People kept telling me to jump in, and I thought they meant into the comments.
So jump. No, I got that blue book, the blue,
Big Blue.
The Big Blue. I've got it on my shelf right over there. My mother bought it for me in the 80s, I guess, when I told her I was looking into this witchcraft thing. Well, you need this book.
I have it on VHS.
Ooh.
I am the Gen X witch of all Gen X witches.
That's the version I had, Jason, and mine got lost in a move, and I was crying. I was so upset when I lost it. I had notes in it and everything.
Yeah, this is just my yellow pages. Yeah.
Corn pages, as my child calls them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very flip through. There's
And the
my-
purple. Yep.
yeah, it's classic. The first edition of this, on the back, it said that Raymond spent much of his life pubically defending the craft.
I mean, technically.
He did say to touch yourself.
Yes.
I do have one thing about this too that I wanted to talk a little bit about. So I'm not Wiccan. I'm not. However, our friend Brandy, my friend Brandy, that you have met once or twice, Brandy is a Wiccan. And she is one of my dearest friends. And in about, well, it would have been a little later than, it would have been later than 89, maybe about 91 or 92. But I grew up as an evangelical Pentecostal, and I only knew the church. I only knew evangelical Christianity. And I remember that Brandy was just so lovely, and she was a vegetarian. No, she was a vegan. She was a vegan in a little small town where you would like, you're a witch and a vegan, and it was so strange. And I remember she had this little 1980 something 82 Chrysler K car, the little square convertible with the wood grain paneling. And she had on the back of her car, she had "My Other Ride is a Broom" bumper sticker. And I remember being an evangelical, being somewhat aghast by the fact that her other car was a broom, and she would laugh and she would say, "Well, we don't really talk about my religion unless you're interested. We'll talk. If you have questions, we'll talk. But we don't really proselytize." I said, "But you have your other ride is a broom. I mean, it's kind of funny." She said, "Yeah, well, people thought, like, people think a lot of things about it, but you know, I'm a Wiccan, and we're witches, and I just think it's funny." So for me, that was my introduction to the Wiccan traditions and the Wiccan religion and witchcraft, and she really, in all of that closed-minded, narrow Midwestern point of view, she was a beacon of light. And even my own mother, who was a devout Christian, would say, "Oh, I love that Brandy. I just wish she were a Christian. She's just so lovely. I can't believe she's not a Christian." But she really was, as a Wiccan in the 80s and 90s, she really was a beacon of light in a dark space where I lived mentally, emotionally, physically in the Midwest. And because of her and her association with Wicca and her association with Raymond Buckland, that's what helped me to pursue my own path of witchcraft. So even though, yes, 1989, yes, it was like an encyclopedia, but it was a wonderful time capsule. And it was really quite intriguing to see from all of those years ago, something that was so new and something that was so strange for the United States. So overall, it was lovely.
Doesn't he look like a hypnotist here on the back of this book?
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna hypnotize you. Like, I just always forget like how he looks there. I just expect him to take out the watch. You are getting sleepy. You are getting sleepy.
So
You will practice
Jason,
witchcraft.
do you want to tell everybody about his hobby before he passed a few years back in 2017? What was he doing live in Ohio, standing on the stage?
So one of the things that's funny, if you read the Big Blue Book or you watch this video, they're all very dry and very humorless. But Ray was actually pretty funny. There are some videos of him doing stand-up comedy just a couple of years before he passed away. And some of those jokes are not like as terrible as you might think. My friend Matt Oren would all call them dad jokes, of course, but they're not the worst jokes.
You think they're funny?
Jokes.
I think some of them are funny. I'm trying to find one because I think it's funny.
Okay.
I think if you look stand-up comedy Raymond Buckland on YouTube, I think they're all on YouTube.
They're
a lot
definitely
of them.
there.
He was at a hotel or something, wasn't he? Doing it
He
regularly
was.
at a hotel.
He was in a hotel in Ohio near where he lived, and he helped put the nights together. And he looks very dapper. And So this is one of the jokes. This is my favorite one. My mother-in-law is very much like a slinky. You remember the slinky. It's a toy that's really of no earthly use to anyone, but really puts a smile on your face when you push it down the stairs. I mean, it's a little mean-spirited, but I think that's genuinely funny.
That joke still exists today. Like that shows up in memes on Instagram.
I don't think that's his joke.
No.
Probably not, but I feel like he helped promote it.
Well, I guess he could have stolen it, but he told it. I don't know. I don't know all the copyright of jokes, but I think that joke's funny. Our clock fell off the wall. It had fallen just a minute before. It would have hit my mother-in-law on the head. That damn clock was always slow. He really didn't like his mother-in-law very much. But yeah, but it's funny that none of these things really capture that he could be funny and that he had a sense of humor. And when I met him, and I only met him like very, very briefly, he was very humble. He was not what I was expecting because he always looked so serious, like he was getting ready to hypnotize you. And he really oh, Rob, you're killing me with that. Yeah. But that never really came through in his books, which I always thought was a shame, because some writers can convey that, and he just could not in his witchcraft books.
My first Raymond Buckland book was The Magic of Chantomatics.
Ooh, I'm so sorry.
So I want to just give my little story with the Raymond Buckland book, because everybody has their Big Blue story. Every time I do an interview with people, they will say my first book was Big Blue. At least now, Thumper Forge is upside down. Is he been hexed? Has someone hexed Thumper?
I'm still here.
Courtney, you're just upside down.
You're just upside down.
Oh, I've been in worse positions, as long as you can hear me.
Well, I'll continue. So everybody has a story. Whenever I do an interview with people and talk about origin stories, again, Big Blue is just, and I actually just did an article about that particular thing. And basically my origin story not my origin story, but one of my first, not my very first, my second book was Big Blue, not this one again. And I went, and I specifically remember leaving my office. I had an internship at a film production company, and went across the street to the Barnes and Noble on Fifth Avenue in New York City and bought the book. I remember doing this. This is like one of those things. And so I remember doing this, bought the book, and then I got on the A train to go home, rode the A train home, reading the book, opened it up, and then went home. And I was living with my parents, sat out on the sofa with my giant Big Blue, and it was like reading it. You know, I was 18, 19 years old, and my parents were like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm reading a book on witchcraft." And they're like, "Okay." And they just kept moving by. And there I was, Richard-Lael, very different from your experience, I would say. So there I was reading my Big Blue. And I eventually did my first ritual out of this one and the other Marion Weinstein book that I had for Samhain not long after. So that, like many, many Wiccans and witches currently, at least in my generation, Big Blue was everything. Big Blue was the beginning. And 100%. So that...
Thorne, didn't you have like the last witchcraft related thing Raymond Buckland ever wrote in your first book? Or one of the last?
Oh, no. Oh, God.
Your introduction.
No. So Ray Buckland wrote the cover blurb for my first book. And it's funny. So Ray Buckland was not a part of my witchcraft experience, and I think it's because I am a millennial, right? I'm a bit younger than most of y'all, I think.
We're old people.
And so we for us it was all Silver Ravenwolf. It was totally Silver Ravenwolf, some Scott Cunningham, but mostly Silver Ravenwolf. And afterward, so Ray Buckland already felt like a relic by 98, 99. So, but nonetheless, like he had this position, obviously, like it was this experience of being young and knowing that you had to read Buckland, you had to know Buckland, and then trying to struggle through it precisely because it was, as Jason pointed out, so humorless, unfortunately. But since my first book was about initiatory Wicca explicitly, the folks I was working with at Llewellyn were like, well, you need to get some blurbs. You know, why don't you reach out to Ray? And I was like, excuse me. No. What? Like, what? Why would he speak to me? Never mind that I'd like never written a book before, never approached anybody before, especially cold, let alone Ray Buckland, right? This man who I've been instructed that I'm supposed to look up to for years at this point. Who at this point I've heard stories about because now I'm an initiate, right? Anyway, my editor was like, I'll do it for you. And he wrote me a really lovely blurb and then sent an email wanting to know why I didn't recommend his books. Not that I said anything negative about, I just didn't mention him. The books aren't in the bibliography. They aren't in the suggested reading. And it wasn't personal, but it was 2018 and I wanted to point to different books. And I panicked. I totally panicked over that email because I was like, how do I tell Ray Buckland that I just didn't? But then he died.
You were saved. You were saved by the bell. That was good.
Wow.
So in a way,
I never actually exchanged words with Ray Buckland.
you exchanged email though. I mean, that's more than most people. And he blurbed
It
your
wasn't
book.
an exchange. It was a forwarded email.
Oh, okay.
No.
Oh.
We
So
never
great.
actually had direct contact.
Did you answer him back?
No, I called my therapist and I stared at a wall for a few days and then he died.
Well, we know who's hexing in this one.
Now we know who turned Thumper
Sorry,
upside down.
everyone.
I forgot to announce this at the start of the show. We're giving away a copy of the book tonight for the best comment in the chat. So I think at the end of the show, we'll be voting, and you all can vote with us on the best comment in the chat. So you have a few more minutes to write funny comments. And now the pressure's on. So chop, chop.
The heat is on.
Yeah, the heat is on.
We don't have Miss Courtney. Jumper, did you have anything with the movie before we move on to comment? Oh, very loud.
I'm okay. I am suffering from technical difficulties, so I'm trying to make as like little waves as possible.
Okay. All right. Well, does anybody have any quotes from this fine film?
I have a quote.
Okay.
Touch your right nipple, touch your left nipple, touch your genitalia, touch your right nipple again. I mean, that's the best quote.
I liked his criteria for being a Wiccan.
Oh, do it.
I made a list.
Oh, do.
This is the key to being a Wiccan. I'll read them all to you, but then I want to talk about one of them in particular. Prep and use of meeting place, and then he has to spend 5 minutes talking about what that means. 2, service. He never tells us to what or why. Celebration of festivals. Belief in a deity. Reincarnation and retribution. Those things are paired together. I think that's interesting. And then, of course, adherence to the Wiccan Rede. I have so many questions about all of these. But they're so... What tight parameters, Ray Buckland. This is why I couldn't put his book in my book. Sorry, everybody.
It's from a different age. It's from a different time. This was the
Panic.
witchcraft. He came out of the 50s and 60s and evolved through the, you know, it was a reactionary movement as much it was a birthing of a religious movement. So I really felt that in the 90s when I joined an initiatory Wiccan group, is not coming from a culture where I felt that I needed to be reactionary, that I felt there was a lot of reactionary elements in the practice. So you see all of that. You see the 60s in it. You see the 70s in it. You see still the 80s reaction to the satanic panic in it. And that's what it was. I remember being there at that moment when the Ray Bucklands and Scott Cunninghams were sort of fading out, and the Silver Raven Wolves were coming in, and I had Silver Raven Wolf. Those didn't get lost in my moves. I still have the original ones I had in the 90s from there. So I can totally see that bridging that Thorne's talking about, and why your generation wasn't able to grasp, not grasp, that's the wrong word, but work with this one as much as they did with Silver Ravenwolf's books. It was a total generational change.
Even as a Gen Xer, like my favorite 101 book was Ravenwolf's book, because it was so much more personal, and that was new. Really, everything else had been sort of an instruction manual, or even earlier, just sort of a collection of rituals. And Silver Ravenwolf's book was like, then I go to this thing and I have magical stuff on, and then these things happen, and then I do magic at my house all the time. And it made witchcraft feel much, much more alive, which I think is now the prototype for how we write books about witchcraft.
Totally.
But before, it was very much just sort of clinical. And I think Ray was one of those very clinical writers, which again, I said, is a shame, because he had that really great sense of humor that he never quite put into his books.
So on the movie, why wouldn't they put that life force into their rituals and things? That's just bad directing or bad acting. And they weren't acting. They were Wiccans doing ritual.
And you know what? People always say to me, Patti, when I do lectures on narrative film, they say, well, when is somebody going to do an actual film about Wiccans? When is somebody going to do a film? And I say, you know what? If they did an actual film, if they actually filmed us what we do every day, witches and Wiccans, it would be the most boring movie you'd ever seen. There he is again. He keeps showing up in this episode. So we have proof is, if they just filmed us doing what we normally do, we're not very exciting. Now, and it is possible that they were also very nervous to be on the camera.
Absolutely.
So, you're not going to get the power you get in a private ritual in front of the camera without actors, I think.
And they did this in just 3 days. I mean, they only had 3 days to do this. I mean, it was very quick.
I think it's also worth noting that any marginalized group, if they show any kind of emotion, the dominant groups get nervous. So there is something kind of very low-key about it. Like, let's keep everything under control. Let's be constrained.
Right, like the man is fabricated a PhD, right? Like, he's trying to present himself as an academic, and these people as being perfectly respectable, just like you. Look at all of their mom hair, right? Like, this is very deliberate.
Yeah.
He had a PhD from the Universal Life Church. That cost back then $24.95. I mean, that's an investment in education, Thorne.
Yeah. My PhD goes to another school. You wouldn't know him.
I am a minister of the Church of Universal Life.
So am I.
Aren't we all?
I'm not. I'm a spiritual humanist and a nomian. Those are my 3 online ordinations.
We need a Church of the Goat.
Ooh, we do.
I think it's time for the movie minute, though. As
do we have one?
No, of course we do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hearing all these. It must be very haunted movie. So we have no quotes. We had Richard-Lael's quotes. So we are so ready for the beautiful movie minute, Mr. Mankey.
Now, of course, it would be easy to dunk on this movie by myself for 3 or 4 minutes. Clearly, the production values are minimal, and the people involved are not master thespians. But there is an earnestness to this film that I think should be appreciated. Nearly everyone involved was a witch, and they were making this video for witches. In 1989 especially, that's a very lovely thing. It's true, though, that there's not a lot of witchcraft in this movie. Buckland drones on and on for the film's first 30 minutes, blathering on about witchcraft being a religion, which is not believing in the devil, how Christians were only allowed to have sex 4 days a year, and even then, they could only have sex if the moon was waxing in the first quarter. And yes, that history. Even in 1989, a lot of it was absolute nonsense, but in fairness, It was what many witches believed at the time, and all that malarkey was repeated ad nauseum in books, including the books written by a certain Raymond Buckland. There's not a break from Buckland's speechifying until we get to the 27-minute mark, where we mercifully get a bit of the Charge of the Goddess and some boobs. This is a witchcraft video, and it took 27 minutes to get to boobs. I think everyone involved should be just a bit embarrassed, and that the script should have gotten to the boobs much, much faster. But just imagine being a solitary witch in 1989 and renting this movie from the video store. For you younger viewers, those were real things we used to have to do. This movie might have been the first time you'd ever seen actual witch rituals performed by witches. And I will admit, with the colorful robes, the dancing, and the slightly irritating folk music, this is exactly what many of us thought Wicca would look like and feel like way back then. For good or for ill, the ritual segments were like Llewellyn book covers come to life. Yep, everyone involved in this film had some bad hair choices, but as Buckland points out in the video, a good witch should always have 5 things on their altar: salt, a censer, water, a candle, and a bottle of Aquanet hairspray. Just be careful not to keep the candle near the Aquanet. And if there was a male witch in your coven, well, of course, a mustache comb was an absolute must. And then there, of course, is Buckland's wardrobe choices. If his opening 30-minute lecture hadn't already put you to sleep, his brown sweater was there to finish the job. Maybe it was for the best that he wasn't wearing the stereotypical black, but maybe he should have. Watching him in this video is like watching a nap come to life. Oh, look, Uncle Bucky is rattling on about witches again. I hope he doesn't get any drool on that sweater. Yes, the jokes are easy, but I need to stop. Everyone involved had such good intentions, and they were working with such a small budget. I make more in a week doing the Witches Movie Coven than the entire budget of this Llewellyn classic. No one in the witchcraft world in 1989 could have foreseen how far we would come as a community. To think, here we are today, 35 years after Buckland's video opus, with witches from around the world all gathered to make fun of this very special video. That's a pretty great accomplishment right there. And due to time limitations, I have only been able to touch briefly on the basics on this movie. There is, of course, much more to witchcraft yesterday and today. I encourage you to read my new book on Raymond Buckland and investigate. In the Witches Movie Coven, we do not proselytize, but I am begging you to buy my book. I am Jason Mankey. Blessed be.
Yay! That is beautiful.
That is my favorite scene from the whole movie, when he gets done and he picks up a copy of Gerald Gardner's Witchcraft Today and starts thumbing through it. I lose my crap every time. I find that hilariously funny for some reason. It's just so awkward and weird. Oh yes, thanks for watching my video. Now we'll read this book.
Masterpiece Theater goes to witchcraft.
Yes.
All right. We have one thing to do yet. We vote. Wands up, wands down on this classic film.
I don't know what that means.
This is how we vote. Is it good or bad?
Wands.
What do you do when it's bad or good?
Wands down.
And you could do a halfway, 2/3, 3/4.
Okay. I was like, if it's a wand, it'd be symmetrical on, but anyway.
Yeah,
I'm ready.
Yeah.
We get creative with our wands.
Okay.
Should people watch this movie or not?
Oh, that's a different question.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Of course.
Yeah.
I'm doing wands down for the movie because it's really bad, but if I just do it as a historical piece, I'll do it up because we need it, but it's a bad movie.
The question was if we should if people should watch it though.
Well, it's just wands up or wands down. It's not specific.
Okay.
It's not specific. So I'll be in the middle.
All right, everybody. I'm really neurodivergent.
Robert Hicks was not wrong. It was like being back in school with a teacher droning on.
Yeah.
It was terrible, but you should watch it.
Yeah, exactly. It's terrible, but it's a good piece of history.
I'm really literal.
This is our first wiggly wand film yet. This is our first wiggly wand. Touch yourself. So, all right. Well, it is about that time. Anybody have anything they want to talk about before we howl at the moon and cackle?
Rob, do we have any contenders for best quote of the night? Are we going to vote on one of them for a free book? Or maybe I'll just go back through this and pick something out. Oh,
Yep.
that's my job.
Your
Well,
job.
that's rough.
Rough.
That's rough.
Well, do you know? Oh, next week while Jason is scrolling to find the fabulous quote. Next week, what are we doing, Heather? You're our
Oddity.
Oddity.
The movie Oddity. So we're changing it up again.
Okay. The movie Oddity. You guys check it out. Watch it. It's obviously available somewhere because we always check that out. No, he is not already. Jason, Lisa, he is working on it.
I can add also is that we have Mystic South coming up in July, and I talk about that every week. But the schedule was just released, so if you're interested, you can go get join and look and see what's there. And with this movie, and I got pulled into a Wiccan panel on initiatory Wicca by a local group here that I got started with, and so they're doing a panel on what it means to be initiated into a Wiccan coven and Wicca and all that stuff. So they're doing that panel that will be there as well this year, which is a first. So they volunteered me to be part of it. So that is happening, and there's a lot of other stuff. So if you're interested in Mystic South, the schedule is out. You can see what's coming and what's going to be presented for 3 days in Atlanta in July.
Thank you. So you guys check it out. Like us, follow us. I'll be at Penhurst Asylum next week. Anybody wants to go hunt ghosts in an ancient, scary old asylum with me 3 nights in a row, head on down. And
Thumper Forge and I will both be at Austin Witch Fest this weekend, this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. It's Austin Witch Fest, and surprisingly, it's in Austin, Texas.
Okay. So do we have a quote? Do we have a winner yet?
I like the ones that say hi.
I liked Nathan King's "And Then He Died," Thorne Mooney.
Yeah,
I think technically that's my quote.
It's technically your quote, but Nathan immortalized it, so I'm giving Nathan King the win.
Leave it a man to take a woman's words and make them his.
Yes, Seamus was in second place. Both of you, I think, will win something from Jason.
I love Nathan, so that's fine.
Yeah.
You can have it.
Okay. On that note, we are past time. See you guys all next week. Like us, follow us. Witches, here we go. Let's show them how they do it in 2025. 1, 2, 3. Yay!